Good morning. My name is Professor Dr. Gerd Graus, OBE, and I am a visiting professor at the National Research University in Moscow. And I was also the first Director of Education, Global Director of Education for Kidzania. And as such, I've been for a long period of time involved with both business and education, but perhaps in a slightly more unusual way, in the sense that it's not the return on investment that's ever concerned me, but it's the return on involvement. And it is about how can we make better the education of our children by involving more partners. The education of our children being essentially a jigsaw, and we all have our part to play. Before I go on to our panel, I wanted to just do a little bit of scene setting so that we can then enter that discussion about not return on investment, but essentially return on involvement. So bear with me, and then we'll go to the panel.
Training fleas requires a glass jar with a lid. The fleas are placed inside the jar, and the lid is then sealed. They are left undisturbed for 3 days. Then, when the jar is opened, the fleas will not jump out. In fact, the fleas will never jump higher than the level set by the lid. Their behaviour is now set for the rest of their lives. And, when these fleas reproduce, their offspring will automatically follow their example.
And there, in essence, lies our challenge, doesn't it? The challenge that we in our system, in our schooling system, essentially adhere to the definition of insanity, that we keep going on doing the same things and we expect different results. Even kind of during the pandemic, we kept doing the same things and we expected different outcomes. It doesn't work like that. Maintaining the status quo while the rest of the world moves on is just not a good thing. I'm going to be joined by my amazing panel now, and I work with all of these people, and I'm incredibly proud and happy to do so. But I'm even prouder that in some shape or form, I've been able to get all those people to work together too, in what I would call businesses for good. We've worked with business all our lives in schools. We've bought pens and pencils and whiteboards and all those kind of things. But this is different. This is a contribution towards better education for children. This is payment of a different kind. This is a return on investment that needs to be measured differently. This is actually caring about the future of all our kids rather than to satisfy the system. So thank you very much. And over to the panel now for something far more entertaining you've just seen. So I'm joined by Asude, by Lee, by Nick, and by Seb to pick up from that presentation, and I suppose particularly from the little video that puts us all in a jar, and a jar that we need to escape. But perhaps, Asude, if I may start with you to tell us a little bit about Twin Science, where did it come from, and importantly, how does it fit the concept of a business for good?
Sure, Professor. So Twin is a purpose-led education company born out of an NGO. So I think it's definitely business for good. Now it's a 4-year-old startup, but our journey started 10 years ago in an NGO in Turkey. So for us, the answer was to raise double-winged children. On one wing, it was like competence, and the other wing, it was conscience, so that we can get them ready for the future, and we can inspire them to apply their knowledge, their skills for the good of the world. So after that, we created 6 different STEM kits. These kits are Lego compatible and educational kits that teach children electronics, robotics, and AI. But we saw that the education should be hybrid, not just digital or physical, but a combination. So we built our own digital product, Twin App. And to become a global education company, we moved our headquarters from Turkey to the UK in 2020. And Twin's globalization process accelerated after that. We are now Twins products and content. Now they are distributed all around 45 countries in the world. And our goal is that as Twin grows, our unique culture will grow as well and will inspire more business to become business for good. So it will create a sustainable impact, I believe.
I think that's really interesting, and I like the idea that it comes from an NGO, from a charity, and then became a business. And you've taken that ethos. I'm intrigued by the business model in terms of so if I'm poor, I'm in a poor school or a school in a poor area, whatever the terminology we want to use around this. How can I afford Twin? How does that fit within that? Because the business for good bit is surely needs to address that, right?
Yes, that's true. I think it's in the name. This is why we called it Twin. We chose the name Twin because of our commitment to creating equal opportunities in science education. And it symbolizes the connecting the heart and mind while creating equal opportunities for children all around the world. So let me explain in the business model. In Twin's physical world, children can gain valuable skills through hands-on learning, Professor. So the thing that always surprises me when I go to field, in the first 30 minutes, children are afraid to even touch the modules, the electronic modules. And in just 30 minutes, they realize that they can build autonomous cars that Google and Tesla are making nowadays, so with their own hands. So you should see their self-confidence grow in just 30 minutes. So the research conducted by Ipsos with the Twin kits showed that their self-confidence, their problem-solving skills, and their curiosity is increasing while they use the physical STEM kits. This is not surprising because you can imagine if a child builds autonomous car, self-driving car with her own hands, so she can build anything that she wants in the world. So I think this confidence is perhaps the most important treasure that we can contribute to education. And in the Twins digital world, we apply this double wing philosophy to our digital app as well. As you said, we recently launched a campaign with Anthony Ginland, British polar explorer Anthony Ginland, with you and with Verofax, the sustainability company. And inside the app, children can learn STEM disciplines like coding, robotics, AI, and code a project to solve climate change problem and take actions to prevent it. So all our content, they are linked to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals so that children can become socially conscious individuals and they can create preventive technologies, be proactive rather than being reactive, and they can be proactive towards our planet's biggest problems. They can create preventive technologies. I think this is what education needs right now. And we stay true to our funding purpose, giving one free subscription to an economically disadvantaged children to each subscription purchased. And with the World Science Movement project we carry out with YGA, we reached 500,000 children in Turkey, in South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, and many more countries. And this number is growing every day.
I think that's amazing. I wanted to just end on something, because in the presentation, I talk about role models and the importance of role models. And that when we talk to children about their futures, perhaps we should stop asking what they want to become, but we should ask them who they want to become like, because they become values answers. And I have, and you and I have had this conversation before, which is about you as a woman CEO of an ed tech STEM science company from Turkey. Now, just give us a couple of minutes around your thoughts on that one, please.
Frankly, Professor, so as a woman, I always feel very privileged and being encouraged at YGA, because when I said I cannot, they always said you can. So even though I had a successful life and academic career, I always had a fear inside me. What if I wasn't skilled enough as a woman in this male-dominated tech industry? So then one day my mentor at YGA told me not to be influenced by the outside, but to influence the outside with my own self-confidence. So it was a turning point for myself. And I think I felt the same way when I met you, Professor, because this time, that time that we met you, I was afraid if we could be able to succeed on a global scale. And you made us feel that the world needs our story. The world needs double wing philosophy. And now we feel very confident now with your genuine support on the global scale. I can say that. So what I try to do every day is to be a role model for the young girls everywhere and show them so being a woman is something to be embraced, because well-educated, empowered and promoted women are the key to solving the world's problem, I think. So, Professor, thank you for encouraging me, first of all, and making me feel this way, feel confident. And thank you for paving the way for Twin and expanded double wing philosophy. And thank you for flying with us with your double wings, I think, to reach more children all around the world.
Well, listen, that's entirely my pleasure. And thank you for introducing me to the concept of double wing. I love it so much that you need the heart and the head. And it's such a beautiful picture, isn't it? If you've only got one wing, all you do is fly around in circles, right? And you're not going anywhere. So I'm loving this a great deal. Thanks, Asuda. One of the things that's happened with the people on this panel today is that one way or the other, we're all connected, and I'm quite liking that. And sometimes it's happened on purpose, and sometimes it's happened as a fluke. And one of the people I met a while ago, and I know worked with Sir Ken Robinson, and was a friend of Ken's, is Lee Daly, and Lee does many things, but Lee's a storyteller by origin, I think, because I think that's the world that he occupied. And now he's at the point of providing a platform for stories, really, and the twin Hello Genius connection, I think, will be an incredibly fruitful and positive one. Lee, welcome. Thanks for being with us. And I know you're in London at the moment because we're on the way to Saudi Arabia. That's the other thing about this panel. I love how global it is, from Turkey to LA to Manchester to Seb, who kind of is everywhere, really. And the world really is a small place, isn't it? And I'm really glad that you two have met. Lee, tell us about Hello Genius and tell us where it came from and why the name.
Okay, so Hello Genius is an idea that began about 4 years ago, and it was based upon a belief that we needed to build a better set of tools to understand children during their formative years. You know, I did not come from a background of education. I came from a background of the creative industries, and more importantly, I came from being a father of 2 children who also had very different educational pathways. And though both of them succeeded in education, their journeys were very different. So at the beginning of Hello Genius, I sat down with my partner and with Ken, and we said, let's think about, child potential. Let's think about understanding every child on their own terms, and can we build a technology-based solution that allows us to do that, recognizing that there is a great degree of ambiguity and concern around technology in the lives of children. So what we had to do was look at it and say, can we build a technology solution that allows children to learn to reveal themselves to the world in a way that formal education possibly does not allow them to? Can we do that from an early age? And can we develop the insight, empathy, and understanding of children at an early age through the constructive and safe use of technology? And if so, what would a product like that look like? So when you talk about me as being from a storytelling background, Gert, to a certain extent, you're right. It's the world of advertising and marketing I came out of, but my core skill was strategy. Now, to develop good strategy in any business, you have to understand your audience. You have to understand whether something you're conceiving of producing actually will create real value. Does it solve a real problem in people's lives? So what we went out and did was we did a lot of research with parents of young children, and we did a lot of qualitative and quantitative research. We sat down and spoke with parents, and we asked them what were the things that concerned them about how their children were being educated, what were the things that concerned them about their relationship with their children in the real world, in the lives they're living day to day when they're going to work, and often dual income households, they're away from their children a lot. What are the things that concern you? And one of the first things was safety. You know, we're very concerned about our children being safe. So this spans the generations. No matter what age, parents want to keep their children safe. So we said, right, job one for us is let's build a platform technology that will keep children safe. So we have to create a safe environment. Then we said, okay, how can we build a platform that through learning, children will be able to reveal themselves to the world in a way which possibly they cannot now. So we ended up building essentially a product that is a dual app system. There is a learning application for children and a connected app for parents, which offers parents data, insight, knowledge about what their children are learning in real time, the ability to interact with their children, to share content, to connect with them via phone and video within the application, all in a totally safe environment. So what we essentially set out to do was say, right, let's build a tool to better understand our children on their own terms. Let's foster deeper relationships with the people closest to them, parents and grandparents. Let's make this all real, very accessible and affordable. And basically, let's put it on a global platform so it's accessible to everyone.
Thanks, Lee. It's interesting as I was listening to you and then recalling what Asula was saying earlier. So Twin Science comes out of the NGO, and to a degree, Halogeneous comes out of Ken Robinson.
Yeah,
and there is a connect, isn't there? So I know I was very fortunate to be part of it. That Twin Science and Halogeneous are now looking to collaborate. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So I think on a number of levels, we celebrated the core values and the background of Asud and her team and what they're setting out to do. We looked at the extraordinary nature of their products and their achievements to date. But where we first and foremost, I think we are aligned is in the values of what we're trying to do. We're trying to help children. We're trying to gear children for the future of society, not the history and past of education. And I think that's what really drew us together in the first place. On a more technical level, what we are hoping is through our platform, we can become a channel for Twin Science to continue to grow, across all of the markets and continue to grow into markets where educational resources are sometimes limited, but the potential of children is not. So as Sud mentions, markets in Africa, markets in some markets of Southeast Asia. The great thing that is happening now in Africa is the rise of digital connectivity and Wi-Fi. The infrastructure for education, the resources for education in a lot of markets, they lag behind, but they needn't do so. What we have to do is think about the tools we have at our disposal now in terms of technology to help facilitate the acceleration of access to learning and empowerment for both boys and girls in these communities. So that's where I think we can collaborate effectively together as businesses with a shared mission to help more children fulfill on their potential.
When we opened Catania London, some years ago now, the accusation was thrown at us very quickly, and it's the playground of the middle classes. Not everybody can afford this. So is Halogeneous the virtual playground of the middle classes, or what are you doing in your business model to provide access for all?
Well, that's a very good question, because we are a subscription-based business model, and I think that if you take the economic situation of the world today, And you look at it, I think inequality has been growing for a very long time, to the point where it's actually offensive now in a lot of our societies. I would love to give our product away for free in the same way that Facebook and so many of the other tech companies did these platforms. But what they end up becoming is advertising companies, right? What they end up having to do to make money is to basically sell people's data, to invade their privacy, to impact their lives in a way that I disagree with. So ironically, as a former ad guy, one of our first principles was no advertising. We're going to keep children safe. Data privacy is sacrosanct to us. We're aligned with every single possible data code around the world. So what we've sought to do is to build a subscription-based model that we believe is accessible. It may not be accessible to all, but like Assood, we started from the point of view of the double bottom line, or as my daughter would now say, the triple bottom line. So we want to deploy our technology for good, to level the playing field. So we're looking at programs to align with foundations. We're looking at communities around the world. For example, Myanmar, despite the terrible problems Myanmar is having now, what I witnessed there in 7 or 8 years of doing business there was a society that went from almost a purely agrarian economy to a mixed agrarian digital economy, where there was this flood of Android-based smartphones into Myanmar. So you've got over 70% penetration of smartphones. That means children can have access to digital education. Now, in a country like that, I would like to use the for-profit side of our business to deploy our technology for free. So we are looking at mechanisms to deploy our technology to level the playing field.
Thanks, Lee. And there's a nice link there in terms of both Hello Genius, because our next guest is a fellow board member, but also in terms of lifelong learning, because Seb Coe is also the Chancellor of Loughborough University. And much more importantly, like me, he hails from Sheffield. So I'm very happy that we're Northern boys on the run there. Welcome, Seb. Seb, on one of the things that I know you think about and talk about a lot is the issue of health and well-being, and in the broadest possible sense. And that's also part of experience, isn't it? And contextualize people who are socioeconomically disadvantaged suffer more in those areas than others, etc. So it's part of that whole complexity. I have a concern about this, and I wanted to bring this in at this point. I have a concern about this, that at the moment, partly because of COVID, we talk a lot about health and well-being, and I don't think we do a great deal about it. How do we get it to stay central on the agenda, and what do we need to actually do to make a difference, to make it change?
Well, look, it's a multifaceted question, and I'm not surprised that you've asked it, because it is absolutely the money question at the moment. My gut instinct is that we were nudging gently and in sort of rather spluttered, in a rather spluttered way, towards a broader understanding that physical activity, or more appropriately physical inactivity, was probably the single biggest drag anchor on global economies. And contingent with that, of course, was a broader view that a happy and healthy and well-adjusted populace is, in terms of mental well-being, was absolutely preferable alongside the physicality. So to answer your question specifically, there are some actually encouraging positive elements, I think, to have come out of this. That I spend a great deal more of my time talking about this issue now, physical health, mental well-being, than I've ever done before. There is at least a global conversation. And it's about time we had it, because in simple terms, there is one sobering statistic, and that is that roughly between the age of 9 and 13 or 14, the average child loses at least 50% in physical activity. Now, if you extrapolate that forward, into, these, young people becoming, in their 20s and 30s, you have a massive bottleneck, particularly around health resources. And actually, interestingly, if you had any medics on this call, they will tell you that they are witnessing sort of patterns of illness and disease that would not normally be hitting people until they were reaching, shall we say, their mature years. They're now witnessing those sorts of things, type 2 diabetes, in late 20s and 30s. So the issue for me is that, these aren't mutually exclusive positions. There's a complete disconnect between those areas of government that are supposed to be promoting physical activity and health. They think that, obesity is a National Health Service problem. Actually, it isn't the National Health Service problem. They're the end, they're the end user in a way. They're the ones that are providing the care when it goes horribly wrong. But if you're wanting people to be more physically active, then you're going to ask, they need space to play. They need space to be physically active. That then is not a National Health Service issue. It's about planning. These are not complicated issues, but they need a holistic approach rather than thinking, oh, it's health, therefore it's the Department of Health or the Department of Ill Health, as I tend to describe it, or it's about education, and so therefore that only resides in an educational environment. I think the one thing we've learned in the last few years is that there are so many multidisciplinary responses that are needed, and one of them is a complete rejig of the way we think about physical activity and actually the beneficial aspects of sport tied into the curriculum. The fact that by 2035, 50% of the world's population will be deemed physically inactive. And what does that in essence mean? It means that you've got about half the global population that are sort of lugging their way through a day, and you've got fewer and fewer people doing more and more, and within that you have a disaster. You have a recipe for disaster.
And so I think one of the things that I take from this is almost a confirmation. We need to decompartmentalize, don't we? We need to, rather than serve the system, we need to serve. In our case, we need to serve the children, because you need to bring the services together. What seems to happen is, as you say, it is something falls within the empire of health, or it falls within the empire of schools, or it falls within the empire of local authorities, and that kind of full service.
The greatest progress we made, and I'm talking UK-wide, but I've seen this model being rolled out across the globe. For my sins, after the delivery of the London Games, I was asked by the Prime Minister to chair a cabinet subcommittee on physical inactivity, and he was absolutely right to be focusing on it. The stats, the numbers are worrying. Of the top 10 pathologies, physical inactivity, it's not uniquely linked, but it runs right the way through. It runs right the way through. And I remember sitting down and looking at this with the Cabinet Office and coming to exactly the conclusion that I've expressed here, that this is not, you can't say, oh, well, somebody is obese, therefore it's an issue that the National Health Service has to deal with, because it's actually much more complicated than that. And for the very first time in the same Cabinet subcommittee looking at almost anything, I had the Secretary of State for Transport there, the Secretary of State for Defence, Secretary of State for Education, for Health. I had Treasury ministers there. And actually we made great progress on the full recognition that actually they all had a part to play in this, whether it was planning, whether it was civil society, whether it was tax and spend policy. Look, very good example, if, for instance, we think it is perfectly reasonable to zero rate sales tax for school clothes and books and food, because it's better that you've got children that are clothed and kids that are reading, then why are we not zero rating gym equipment or memberships to gyms? Why are we not zero rating, club memberships? Why are we not reducing the tax burden or the insurance burdens on organisations that are out there trying to promote this? So I think that we do need and we made progress. Actually, a change of prime minister, and there was a change of emphasis, and they all went off in a slightly different direction. I think it was a mistake, but that's history. But I do think that you're right, and the question you were asking is the only question to be asked, is that we know this is an issue. How is it best dealt with? And it is a combination of the commercial sector and governments being a great deal more collaborative within their own government structures on this.
And a matter of trust, I think, Seb, because there is mistrust by between some of those organisations, aren't there? The minute the private sector gets involved, people become fearful of the profit motive, for example, and maybe we need to redefine profit within this and what we mean.
That in itself is an interesting discussion, because actually there was a piece of research not that long ago that asked particularly millennials where, if they were carving out a career and they wanted to make a significant difference, they wanted to flick the social, the cultural, the political dial, what sector, where would they best be placed? And I think if you'd asked our generation that question, we would have almost certainly said probably government or NGOs or large charities or the tertiary sector. This generation are actually saying that they think they can flick the dial in a more purposeful and meaningful way by being involved in a shared values, great commercial business. And I think that we've got to look, and there are skill sets. I saw that throughout London. I mean, there is still a massive wariness between the commercial sector and the public sector. And I witnessed that during the London years. We could not have delivered the games in London without a suffusion of those skills. But when we first sat down, when I appointed the chief executive to the London Organising Committee as a former chief operating officer from Goldman Sachs, you'd have thought I'd announced this culling of, the firstborn in families. And interestingly, when I then had conversations with the commercial sector, it was, oh God, do we have to work with government? Do we have to work with local authorities? Interestingly, that same person that became my chief executive then took up a role in government as a Treasury Minister. And the commercial sector will tell you they learned a great deal about the delivery of projects from the public sector. And the public sector, openly, from the Mayor of London down, said it was actually great to have the smart commercial organisations sitting alongside them, because it actually sharpened their pencil as well. So the legacy from London was actually manifested itself in some strange ways. But pulling together those relationships between the commercial and the private sector, particularly around the issues that we're talking about, which is physical and mental health, those relationships are still extremely strong in many of those London boroughs.
So, and I'm also thinking about how this part of the conversation does link to Hello Genius as a platform, and as a platform to get those messages and that content out there, and how it connects on the other hand to the science of twin science, because why not create resources that sit around that? And that is where I'm kind of sitting there thinking, in the best school in the world, which is in Sheffield, the mantra is every child is everyone's responsibility. And I'm seeing this jigsaw constantly happening here, and I'm delighted. I'm going to go to, and I realized that I've done something here. I apologize to Nick Richardson now, because what I've done is Nick is the measuring man, so to speak, right? So this is about measuring what we value. And I've done the typical schooling thing. I've left the testing till last. So perhaps, Nick, we should have started with you to kind of break that mold. I'm a huge fan of the work of the Insights family. And it goes back to that thing where I was talking to a group of head teachers fairly recently in the Middle East, and was saying to them, quite soon all your children will have 100% attendance, they'll all get A stars, and how will I know the difference? We don't know our children well enough. We don't do them a favor by just knowing them by their test score and by their attendance percentage. And Nick and friends have sent me loads of data, which I hope Nick can weave into this. I'm fascinated by the fact that large groups of children post. I'll tell the story, right? So in 2017, there was a piece of work commissioned by First Choice asking 8 to 12-year-olds what they wanted to be when they grew up. And they all wanted to be vloggers, bloggers, and YouTubers, huge percentages. And then several months into the pandemic, through the Insights family, this piece of research was kind of reconducted, I suppose. And vast numbers of children now wanted to be doctors, nurses, and teachers. And I thought, every cloud has a silver lining. It does mean that our children are positively influenced by the events they see around them. And I think that's an immensely encouraging thing. So Nick, first of all, tell us about the Insights family and tell us about its aspect in terms of business for good, that contribution that is around a return on involvement.
Sure, thank you. So the Insights family, I suppose we believe in giving kids and parents a voice, and by giving them a voice, there's an opportunity to create a better world, a better life, and a brighter future. And what we do essentially is across 22 markets across the G20 and also Spain and Poland. We survey around about 500,000 children a year and 250,000 parents, and we make all of that data available in real time via our clever technology that we built with our portal. And the reason we do it that way is it's age and gender representative. You can see things as trends emerge. One of the very unfortunate but very good examples was after the George Floyd incident, which happened in the States. Within 24 hours, we could see racism concerns go up significantly. And we didn't just see that in America, we saw that on a global basis. So it's a very effective way of understanding how attitudes and behavior and consumption is changing. And I think, children represent about a third of the world's population. And it was interesting, listening to Seb talk about how, they had a number of meetings talking about future policies and what we can do. But I feel that one thing that we do as a society, if that's across education, if that's from a policy perspective, from a technology perspective, and even from a I suppose a commercial perspective, is that we're not engaging with children, or enough people aren't engaging with children and actually asking them what they think and asking what the parents think. And the speed of change that we're seeing, the impact of COVID has been significant, but there will be also a very long tail for that, which we'll all be figuring out for years to come, is actually just by listening to children, understanding them, then we can create a better world for them. But if we do it without them, I just got a feeling we're going to continue to make the same mistakes that we've made for a long time. And actually, those mistakes are only going to become more significant. With children having so much technology now, the fact that the education system is still designed to really promote a certain way of learning and rewarding that versus teaching children the importance of decision making and understanding and empathy around the information that they have and how to then process that feels like it's fundamentally flawed and isn't going to set this generation up to succeed in the way which I'm sure as parents and we would all want them to have.
Thanks, Nick. Nick, I'm interested in the schooling and education side of things, and you and I have had this conversation in the past. So if I use Catania London as an example, I could use all the others and many other places. The concept of children can only aspire to what they know exists means that if you come from a socially, culturally, economically disadvantaged background, your first choice of all those job activities that exist in there will always respond to what you know. So children from disadvantaged areas will very rarely choose pilot or heart transplant surgeon or TV presenter as their first choice, because it is well outside their experience field. What does happen, however, is if those youngsters then come back a number of times, they will eventually fly the plane, and they will eventually transplant the heart. So because they go on a journey of confidence, and I've asked you the question loads of times in terms of schooling, in terms of education, can we measure confidence, and can we publish that, and can we make that meaningful? Because how brilliant would it be if you could actually, next to your old-fashioned grade, have something that says about you and the journey that you've traveled. Confident children, of course, give me a confident child and I'll bring you the grade. There is that side to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I believe, sitting here thinking about education, there's a need to redefine what education stands for. We see in our data now that a third of parents in the UK don't believe that the school is the best place for children to learn. We see since the pandemic started in France, the amount of children now who are using YouTube to watch educational videos has increased by 168%. So there's, we've seen edutainment, we've seen a number of technologies which allow children to learn in different ways. I just feel we have to go back to ask the question in terms of what does education mean, and how do we redefine it? And I think once we do that and you redefine it, you can then decide the right things to measure upon. Because I feel that the way that we measure the success of children's development aren't necessarily the right ways, or fit for purpose for setting them to succeed in a very different world. But going to your example, you're right. We see that in our data all of the time. There's very significant differences depending on where, with the opportunities that a child has, what their aspirations are, what their confidence levels are, and essentially, the person that they see themselves as being. So we do have to try and create a system which is more personalized. And I think you've also now, for the first time, got a generation of children who are used to co-creating all of their content and creating personalized experiences. My daughter's 3 on Sunday, and she tells us exactly what she wants to watch. And there's so much content of the stuff that she likes on YouTube. She can watch what she wants, when she wants to. If I go back to when I was a child, those opportunities just weren't there. And I think we have to really look at creating opportunities for kids to be able to explore and find things, because if they can, the opportunities are limitless.
Nick, how do you get from your background is also PR, right?
Similar to Lee in terms of strategy, of working across commercial department, always working very closely with data to understand what's going on and then to build future strategies.
So how do you get from that to doing what you do now? What happens?
I think I'd always worked closely with data. I felt quite disillusioned with a lot of the research companies that I'd worked with. I saw that the world is changing faster than ever before, but there was no category, no sector, no demographic as much as children, which was changing so quickly. And then when you think about that further, you see the changes in legislation, which quite rightly so give children a lot more protection about the use of their data. And just secondly, how important children are, that we set them up the right way to succeed. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. To do that, we have to listen to them. If we don't listen to them, we're second guessing. So in some ways, it's a big jump, but in other ways, I feel very fortunate that I've been able to scratch an itch in terms of a frustration piece, but also build a business which is helping organisations, educators, policymakers, governments understand children better to hopefully make smarter decisions on their behalf.
Because I think, thanks, Nick. I think that's that's a key thing. I think some of your findings and some of the work that I've seen, people need to know about, policymakers need to know about, because they tell us things about the children that shows us that we can't sit somewhere in London writing policies that are identical for every child, that we need to look differently. We need to look at how children learn, be that on an app or be that as a maker with Twin, be that on a whatever platform that gives me so much choice, and then underpinned by the work that you do, which essentially does two things, doesn't it? It tells us how successful we're being. It also tells us where the gaps are, where we need to go next. And it tells us about sometimes quite unexpected changes. So we will have an audience out there of schools and head teachers and whatever. And I urge them to look at the Insights family carefully and be in touch and challenge you and I and the others into a dialogue about how we might go forward on this, right?
Yeah, and we're just about to release our first academic paper, our first journal, which we've been working on with some leading academics on, where our team of data scientists and researchers have created a series of personas on children, the first time that this work has ever been done. And that gets released next week. And it's been fascinating because just the old way of segmenting, previously it was a lot of the time was done by age and gender. And we're seeing how that's not necessarily fit for purpose. You look at the Roblox universe, and you have, boys 5 or 6 playing in a universe where girls who are 15 and 16 are also in that universe. So the old ways of segmenting audiences or segmenting, individuals is not fit for purpose. So anyone who would like to see that paper, please let me know. I'll be happy to share it.
Thanks very much, Nick. My head's hurting now a bit, having listened to all of you, but it's kind of good hurting, really. I'd like to, at this point, thank Asudis, thank Lee, thank Seb and Nick, and hopefully, friends, we will in some cases, we will meet again very soon in Riyadh, hopefully on Sunday or Monday. I'd like to, in conclusion, basically say, and I go back to this, that we have to stop thinking about systems and structures and about little empires compartmentalized, that we need to focus on the child and on the learner in general. And we need to mold the system around this. And whichever pieces of a jigsaw we can put around that, we will get it to work. And then we need to move on. But we need to move on from treating them all the same, testing them all the same, and thinking that the definition of insanity will work. It will not. So I'm going to end there now by saying thank you again, and see you next time.